And tonight, actually, we're going to be looking at some of those as they come along. And the last thing to keep in mind is the criteria that we use when assessing a variance. So the Community Planning Act does set, it's called the variance test that's in the Act. And so every time we give a variance, we need to make sure that it meets all three of these criteria that are established in the Act, which is that A, is it reasonable? Is it a reasonable request? 2, is it desirable for the development of the property? And 3, again, crucially, does it meet the intent of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan? So because there's 5 variances, I'll go over each of them separately, and then we actually are going to have 5 separate motions so that the committee can vote one way or the other on each variance. So the first variance, again, is to increase the permitted height from 15 meters to about 15.8 meters. We'll just give them the difference of 16 meters just to make sure there's no rounding errors that come through when it comes time for applying for a building permit. And here you can see basically the rendering that is proposed. So the height here is required really to accommodate parking that's going to be indoor on the first floor, which is going to reduce the overall amount of surface parking. And then you're going to have the residential units starting above, so it's just going a little bit over what would be required in terms of height. And as the developer has gone through and designing this building, they've actually stepped back and stepped down the 2 corners of the building. So while the corners are meeting about the 15 meters today, it kind of steps up for that parapet in the middle. It's for that urban design kind of feature. So that's taking into consideration, I guess, like the neighboring properties. And so the impact of this building, even though it is going a little bit higher, will still be a little bit less because they've designed it in a way that it's going to be stepping down and back at the corners. So again, when it comes time to going through the criteria that's in the Community Planning Act for variances, so the first kind of test is for the height variance, is it reasonable? And we believe it is reasonable. It's a small, minor variance of 1 meter. And again, that step back at the 5th floor really does help to minimize the impact on neighboring properties. We believe it is desirable for the development of the property, as the additional height allows them to do indoor parking, which requires the total overall amount of surface parking, which is just environmentally friendly, and that all meets in again with the intent of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan. The second variance request for the flat roof. So the flat roof is allowed in the general commercial zone, but is not allowed in the R3. So the R3, you need to have a pitched roof, but the general commercial does allow for a flat roof. So if you can see the zoning of the property, the building that's being proposed here actually falls across 2 different zonings. So part of the building is in the general commercial where a flat roof is allowed. The other part is in the R3. And the future development of the site is all in the general commercial zone, which I would assume they're proposing kind of the same style of flat roof buildings. So again, we can look at whether or not it's reasonable, and we believe it is, as there's already a portion of the building that's in that general commercial zone which does allow for a flat roof. We believe that it is also desirable for the development of the property because the rest of the site is intended with flat roofs. So if we're doing a flat roof here, we're keeping it consistent with the design of the rest of the large-scale development. And we do believe that the flat roof is within the intent of the zoning bylaw as well, because it helps to accommodate that modern, very aesthetically pleasing design that's going to come out of it. The third variance is basically to increase the maximum driveway width from 6 meters to 7.6 meters. So this is a standard that when the access meets the actual municipal road, there is a zoning provision that the maximum width of that intersection can only be 6 meters. But when you're doing the design of the parking lot and other driving aisles, you can have up to 7.6 meters. So there's a bit of an overlap there. And so they're requesting just 7.6 meters at the street, which would allow for better traffic flow. We've discussed this variance with the Director of Municipal Operations, who had no concerns with the increase in driveway width. So again, going through, we believe the request is reasonable because it aligns with the rest of the design of the parking lot and the driveways. We believe it's desirable because the larger width allows for maneuverability. And we believe it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan. As again, it aligns with the 7.6 meters. It's always already provided for in the driveways inside a parking lot. So it's just going to line everything up a little bit better. The fourth variance is where things start to get a little bit tricky from the planning perspective on our end. So the fourth variance is to allow parking in the front yard. So there's a requirement right now that applies in the R3 and the general commercial that parking needs to be located not in the front yard, but in a rear yard. And again, that follows into this kind of larger intent established in the municipal plan to encourage dense, walkable communities that are built to human scale. And part of the way of doing that is to ensuring that buildings are close to the street, and that encourages people to walk. It encourages accesses of the building to be located on the street as well, and it creates a street presence. It also helps to ensure uniformity in developments across town because the same standards apply to all new construction in the town of Shediac. So while we're looking at, again, going through and assessing the variance with the criteria that we have, so the parking lots are meant to be located behind the building, partially so that it's out of view of the public. We're also looking at a scenario here where the proponent has basically a vacant land and is creating the scenario in which they require the variance. And we do believe that the site could be redesigned to meet the municipal plan and the zoning standards, so we do not believe that this is a reasonable variance request. Is it desirable for the development of the property? Well, you could argue that parking lots that you have to cross to get to the road can act as a barrier to walkability. So in that sense, it is not necessarily desirable for the development of the property. And it does not also meet the intent of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan. And the last variance, which is very much tied to the parking variance, is the maximum setback. So the maximum setback that is required here is 6.5 meters from the road, and they are proposing just over 25 meters. So again, we'll round it up to 26 meters for the variance, just to make sure that there's no rounding errors when it comes time to apply for the permit. And again, it's kind of the same scenario that we're dealing with the parking, is that if the building was at the road, the parking would be in behind, but because the parking's in front, the building has to be set further back. So with the one variance comes the other. And again, we're still of the same opinion that this is a situation that's being created by the proponent. The site could be redesigned to meet the municipal plan and the zoning standards that are in place today. It does not really contribute aesthetically to the overall streetscape, even though I understand that we're dealing with a cul-de-sac here off of Main Street, or off of Greenwood, I apologize. And further, it does not meet the intent of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan. So just getting that out of the way, we did also consult with the Greater Shediac Sewage Commission on this proposal. There were no major concerns. Some final engineering needs to be done before construction can start. The Director of Municipal Operations with the town requesting a subdivision agreement, and the fire chief, who also had no major concerns with the proposal. Department of Environment had a couple of comments related to a preliminary wellfield zone that's located on the property, as well as watercourses and wetlands. But again, none of that's really applying to this building. It's all maybe geared towards the future buildings that are a little bit closer to that watercourse and wellfield. So the developer has been made aware of those comments, and we'll deal with that at a later date. So public notice was also sent to property owners within 60 meters of the property on March 15th. I got about 4 to 5 calls from people requesting information. And just today we did receive 2 letters of objection. I believe the committee has received copies of those letters, but I'll just read them for the record. So the first one, again dated today, I am writing in response to the variance request by Ron Lord, Shediac Bayview Properties Limited at 488 Main Street. I am a resident adjacent to the property, and I am opposed to allowing the variances. The following is my response to developers' comments on why the variance was requested. Flat roof. The reason that they are proposing that a flat roof is meant to achieve the required density and current architectural appeal is not a valid point. The quoted required density is a goal set by the developer and should not be considered as an argument. They simply want to fit as many people as possible in this building. The reason to achieve the current architectural appeal does not fit well with Shediac's skyline for residential housing. Flat roofs are unsightly and almost non-existent for Shediac's residential community. Flat roofs give an industrial and commercial appeal. A 4-story pitched would not be higher than the proposed 5-story flat roof as stated. They would still be limited to the bylaw's 15-meter height restriction. The only nearby adjacent flat roof properties are all commercial properties directly on Main Street. A flat roof does not match with any residential building within the area and Shediac. Height increase. The developer is stating a 1 meter increase in height is minor. When you consider the 1 meter increase in conjunction with a flat roof versus a 50-meter pitch roof, all sides of the building are increased 5.2 meters. I have drawn a sketch of the proposed variances relative to the current bylaws to illustrate the change. The result is significant increase in building height and area. The building area is increased by 24%, all of which is on top of the building and further obstructing the skyline. The building is part of a residential zone with neighboring single-dwelling houses. It is already widely disproportionate to the surrounding houses. There is no transition zone from 1 to 2-story houses to a towering 52-foot apartment complex. The height and flat roof variance should not be allowed as there is no adequate reason. The bylaw was set for a reason. Why allow them to circumvent it? The building would be even more disproportionate to the neighborhood. It would be one of the biggest buildings in Shediac, if not the biggest. It is already too big for the area, and eyesore on the North Borough skyline. Residents of Greenwood will literally cast in the shadow of this building. We should minimize this impact. Thank you for the opportunity to address my comments, and I hope you will consider them on the decision to allow these variances. And so there was a sketch that was included as well that just kind of shows what the difference would be with the pitched roof and the flat roof. And I believe this person is here as well if they wish to speak more to that effect. The second objection that we received, again, just received today, was submitted in French. So, Monsieur Adams, je vous écris à propos.
I'm writing about this apartment building proposed by Shediac Bay Properties Ltd. We agree with it in general, but we're not in agreement because the height is too high. It's more than 15 meters high, and it's right next to the camping. The campers live on this campsite peacefully and expect to have a view. This building would be much too high.
Wrote that letter, also followed up after with an email, just again asking that the developer not cut trees between the building and the campground for privacy. And if it wasn't timely enough, the developer has also submitted a new site plan today, just showing a little bit more detail as to what's proposed for landscaping. So you can see in response to some of those concerns, it appears that they at least intend to keep trees or to replant trees at the back buffer. Their intent is also to include that privacy fence. And they're also proposing, it's a little bit difficult to see here, but some trees along the road as well to help with its curb appeal. And I believe the developer will be able to speak more to that as well. So the legal authority for approving the variances, again, comes from the Community Planning Act, Section 55(1)B, which is where the test is described in the Act. And again, we'll separate it into 5 motions, so the committee can vote on each motion. If you allow me, I will read all 5 right now for the record, and then when it comes time to voting, we can pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So. Number 1, that the variance requests presented by Shediac Bayview Properties Limited to increase the maximum height allowable from 15 meters to 16 meters to accommodate Building A, as shown on the attached site plan for the property located at 488 Main Street and bearing PID 00798-017 in the town of Shediac, be approved with no conditions because the request meets the intent of the municipal plan. Variance 2, that the variance request presented by Shediac Bayview Properties Limited to provide a flat roof or a pitched roof is required to accommodate Building A, as shown on the attached site plan for the property located at 488 Main Street and bearing PID 0079017 in the town of Shediac, be approved with no conditions because the request meets the intent of the municipal plan. Number 3, that the variance request presented by Shediac Bayview Properties Limited to increase the maximum driveway width from 6 meters to 7.6 meters to accommodate Building A, as shown on the attached site plan for the property located at 488 Main Street and bearing PID 00798-017 in the town of Shediac, be approved with no conditions because the request meets the intent of the municipal plan. Number 4, that the variance request presented by Shediac Bayview Properties Limited to allow parking in the front yard to accommodate Building A, as shown in the attached site plan for the property located at 488 Main Street and bearing PID 00798-017 in the town of Shediac, be refused because the request does not meet the intent of the municipal plan. And 5, that the variance request presented by Shediac Bayview Properties Limited to increase the maximum front yard setback from 6.5 meters to 26 meters to accommodate Building A, as shown on the attached site plan for the property located at 488 Main Street and bearing PID 007988017 in the town of Shediac be refused because the request does not meet the intent of the municipal plan. I think that's everything.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Any members of the committee? Mr. Bryan?
Your fifth, when you say the variance going from 6.5 meters to 26 meters, that you're refusing, that would mean that you'd want the property to hug Greenwood?
So it wouldn't be hugging Greenwood, but it would be on that new public road that we'd be coming down. So if you'll look at the site
Okay,
plan,
so if the parking goes behind,
then the
then
building needs to go up
that
on
settles
the
that.
cul-de-sac.
That's why
yeah.
you're refused, because the way I'd interpreted that you wanted it to hug Greenwood at 6.5, and that would not have been, okay,
No,
that's fine.
yeah, the
Okay.
new building. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Bryan? Do you have any other questions? No? Does any other committee members have any questions?
I think the developer is here and would like to speak, if that's.
Yeah, I'll get
yeah.
to that.
Okay.
Before that,
Yeah.
I just had one. So do you have any reactions to the two letters we received in terms of, do you have anything else to add to those comments?
I guess I'll start with the first one, is more about the flat roof and the height, that they don't seem to think is reasonable. I think I've explained in my report, why it is and why I believe it does meet the intent of the plan. The second one, they're kind of asking for fences and trees, things of that nature to buffer. I believe the developer has been in contact with them, and there's been some back and forth there, and their new kind of landscaping plan does kind of address that. But there's also that question of, if you allow the parking in the front, the building's gonna be naturally closer to that property line, whereas if the building were to go where it should be, then that would not be such an issue.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so does the developer or somebody representing this case would like to speak on behalf of it?
There's a mic here, there's a free mic. Okay, I think there's a.
Just for some context, yeah, if that works. Perfect. Committee, thank you for having us in tonight and Committee, thank you for having us here tonight and the opportunity to present our project. I'm Ron Lord with Shediac Bayview Properties, a resident of Casey Cape, just around the corner here. What we've proposed here is a 4 or 5 story apartment building. And our driving factors of this is quality living, active transportation, and giving the residents of Shediac an apartment experience that might not exist yet, or just improving on what we currently have here in our stock. So I've just put together a few short slides to answer some of the questions, and Josh has done a great job going through this, so we can skip through most of it. But the first thing is the project overview. So as Josh mentioned, the zoning is right. The borough of Shediac is ready for some higher density residential buildings. We do understand some of the concerns of the neighbors, and we're doing our best to mitigate everything. And our team of professionals have used smart growth strategy and the UANI principles as they go through the development of this to understand what's the least impact we can make while delivering these apartments. So some of the things we looked at when going through this is the current land use, the future land use, access, traffic is a big one we'll get into in a second. Making sure that the site is walkable and bikeable, understanding some of the concerns of the neighbors and the neighboring properties, understanding there's a creek to the west and how to respect that. The zoning's right, future land use, making sure that we're integrating into the community instead of just plopping an apartment building in the middle of a field. Making sure the building is appropriate on scale, density, and the availability of units. We'll have a mix of different unit types. Ensuring there's ample green space and reducing our environmental footprint. So when I say reducing our environmental footprint, we are incorporating a net zero stormwater management design to the site. We are putting parking under the building to make sure we're not just building a big parking lot. We are stepping back the corners of the building so it doesn't have the impact on the environment along. All LED light fixtures and all the other common stuff we see. The energy code is all enacted now with the 2015 code as well. So we have done a lot of due diligence to get to this point. So on to due diligence. So our team of professionals have went through everything we possibly could to date to limit our risk and make sure that we're doing the right thing here. So first thing we did when we met back with the town last fall was talk about the traffic impact. We have a very unique site here where it is 6.5 acres, but the two access points to the site are very restricted. The only place we could put the court off of Greenwood is where it's located due to sight lines on Greenwood. And we've had 3 different sightline analysis and 2 traffic studies on Greenwood and Main to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate. And the traffic study takes in the full build out as well at summer traffic numbers. So we talked about line of sight. We've had an environmental review of the property. Last fall, when we first met with the town, we started talking about lands for public purpose. After this presentation, the next thing you're gonna see is the application for the subdivision plan. As part of a subdivision plan, the developer needs to give land for public purposes or money in lieu. Right off the get-go, we're meeting with Danny in the town, we identified, okay, there's a creek on this property. There's a great opportunity to give that land to the town and create a trail network that could eventually connect into the Shediac multi-purpose path. Since then, and even in this week, or last week, we were speaking with some of the landowners, specifically Cove Camping, on how does this trail network interact with our property, but also their property, and how do we get to that multi-uses trail quicker? So as you've seen from that updated site plan, we have brought the building closer to Greenwood now and allow for a trail connectivity with a little fence through there. And we're gonna continue to work with Cove and the other neighbors and the city with Danny on how we make that work. Neighbors, we have consulted with some of the neighbors, and we do want to make sure we continue those conversations as our design develops, for sure. We went through a full zoning review, future land use review, and stormwater management plan, so we're not affecting negatively the system in Shediac that we know there's already a problem with. So I won't go through all these because Josh does a great job in his report, but we did make sure we went through the policies for responsible development in Shediac and that our team fully understood what the goals of the municipal plan are. And since Josh and his team, have sent through this report, we've went back through them and made sure we've hit on them, that we're doing a sustainable development, the housing and residential boroughs, that we're in the right borough, we're proposing the right sort of density for it, that the municipal services are there. We've done fire flow tests. We've spoke with the sewer commission? Yeah, sewer commission on how we're gonna service this, and everything's good. The urban design guidelines and smart growth and all that, we've went through and made sure that, okay, we understand the planning commission's position and how they look at the last 2 variances, and we'll explain how we kind of see it as well. And then everyone can make their decision. Went through the policy 7.4 on the Shediac North Borough, understanding the history and what density is there, what's needed, what you want to do moving forward, and the commercial borough. We originally had thought of putting the entrance to this whole development off of Main Street. But what that really did is it negatively affected the future development for the town in that area. Because of the location of Manick Street, we had to put the entrance off Main Street as close to the bakery and the creek as possible, but the creek pushes us over because of the environmental impacts. So what that did was it actually eliminated an opportunity for commercial on Main Street. So right off the get-go, we said, okay, this isn't what they're looking for, let's figure out the rest, and that's why you see where the driveway is on Greenwood. Zoning, we know what the zoning is now. He did a great job, thank you. So variance request, increase the maximum height. Again, we're going through design development. We are below that 15.87. Like Josh said, we're just gonna ask for that 1 meter just to make sure if we have to change a floor system or something else comes up, we have a little bit of a buffer. The next one on the flat roof, good urban design and planning. We're thinking of the future, not what's been built for the last 50 years. We want to build for the next 50. That's our thinking of that. The other thing it does is it keeps the overall height of the building down when you're measuring this. Because if I did a 4-story building, drop that first floor, the first floor residents are on the ground, and then I have a 20-meter roof above it. So we're just really trying to keep that down for sun shading purposes. Maximum driveway width, this is safety in and out, so it's the reasoning for us designing it like this, to make sure we have room for 2 lanes, 1 in, 1 out. So allowing the parking in the front yards. So we do understand the urbanism and the smart growth philosophy and understanding that we want walkable communities. That's what everyone wants. We want to integrate trails into our development. We want a pleasant architectural appeal that when you come up to the building, the front entrance is in the front, that the fire, postal service, delivery trucks, they see the front of the building. We've went through a few different revisions of this site plan, putting the parking in the front, the parking in the back, parking on two sides, and this made it the best from our point of view. And the reason for that is we're coming in off a court. Yes, we're going to be 26 meters from the end of the court back, and we're going to be 40 meters from the front of the court. Even if we put the building in the front and the parking in the back, we're 6.5 only from that court. But people that live there and are going to interact with the building are now walking all around the building into the parking lot to go in. And the reason we can't just take that front core and put it on the front of the building is with our layouts. So in our main lobby, we're offering the parcel lockers, their mail service, a gym, a cafe, the elevator. There's a block core there that can't just go on the back of a building. And if we do start swapping that, we start losing interior parking stalls, which then need to go outside. So that's the reasoning for the orientation of that lobby in the front. It looks really good. It does look good, but I know we gotta think of planning here, not looks. So the other opportunity that this gives us, putting the parking in the front of the building, is we won't need to clear and cut as many of those mature trees in the back as shown in that updated site plan Josh showed, because now we can put the parking buffer in the front, bring it as close to the court as possible while still keeping a green space and having some nice trees in the street. And then in the back of the building, we can allow for this trail to come through, have a fence, and leave the trees as they are. We're only cutting into the trees, I believe it's 3.5 meters if we do it this way. The other way, we're cutting almost to the property line. And some people might say, well, push your parking closer. It's not just the parking, it's the grade. So our site slopes from east to west, and when we design the parking lot in the back of the building, we're gonna end up with a 10-foot bank down to the parking lot into the building. And it's that bank that we're clearing trees for and having to maintain. So really, when we're thinking about this front parking, yes, I love urbanism, I love smart growth and putting a building right on a street so you can walk right up to commercial shops on the first floor. Where we're coming in off of a court, we're not on Main Street, we're not on Greenwood. I know our team has done a great job making it the most walkable and the most presentable building possible. That's our reasoning for the parking in the front. We will continue to speak with Mr. Robichaud and Cove Campground to make sure that interaction between them and any of the neighbors isn't unpleasant. We want to make sure that our tenants are just as happy as theirs.
Thank you.
I hope that didn't sound like a sales pitch.
Thank you. So does any members of the committee have questions for Mr. Lord? I just have one question. So the main impact of moving the parking lot in the back of the building would be you need to cut more trees, right? And that's the main.
That's a big one that I see. It's also a further walking distance from the court and the trail network. And if we need to do that, we're going to lose indoor parking stalls, and then I need to put more outside.
So where's the trail on the map? I'm not sure if I see it.
So on this plan, I guess I can't point, that's up there right now. On the bottom left-hand corner, you see the gray line will be what's coming from Main Street to the creek. What the discussions with the town has been is there a way to continue that to Greenwood, step one? If there's not a way, or if that's too far away in the future, we're going to develop a trail from that trail network and the LFPP over to Greenwood, over to our new court, which people can then access out to the trail network down the court and on Greenwood. And then just recently, speaking with the campground, they're in talks with this town of how to cross Greenwood as well. And what they've asked me is, how can we connect that trail to the east boundary of the site, which is why we've added some distance there, along the back of your building and cross into the campground somehow. That's not finalized, and there's a million discussions to have, but what we're trying to do here is make sure that that's possible.
So the change of the parking lot to the back may or may not affect this trail.
The parking in the back, what it'll do is where I show a fence and trees now, there's going to be a bank just because of grading of the site. Because what we don't want is, we can't just build the building into that bank and then or build the parking into that bank, because we need to depress it for stormwater management as well. So we're creating a bank, the parking lot's level, and then you're walking into that underground parking stall.
So what are you doing with the building for that bank?
I'm sorry?
The bank in the back. So what's happening with the building there?
If the building stays how it is,
Yeah.
that grade will actually just come up our foundation wall.
Okay. You don't have a picture of the back of the building, do you, with that grade?
Yes, yep. I don't have my computer. Do you have all the renderings I sent through, guys? We can update a rendering and send it through.
Okay.
But just like, it's not, the back of the building wasn't in the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roderick.
The other variance is in line with the comments here, just the same
Okay.
purpose.
Thank you. Okay, so does anyone from the public want to speak on behalf or against these variances? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres personnes dans la salle qui aimeraient parler pour ou contre ces variances? Non? OK. Donc, quelqu'un? OK, merci. What's your name, sir?
Hi, thank you. My name is Bernie Legier. That project is going to butt right onto my property. And my feeling is if the parking lot's in the back, the building, in the winter when they're coming in with loaders to clean the snow, it's directly in line with my house. And that beeping sound going to directly hit the house. If it's in the front, my garage and my neighbor's garage are going to buffer that sound. And that's the only thing for me. I mean,
So you'd prefer that?
I prefer the parking lot in front because of buffering the sound of for snow removal, since there's no fence there or anything like that.
Okay, see.
Okay?
So does anyone have any questions for Mr. Leger?
I don't have a question for Bernie. It comes in line exactly what Bernard has said, and also what the developer said. I much prefer also the parking in the front for the simple reason. First of all, it's zone R3, so it's when we look at our development in the municipal plan, we look at following. If this was a changing of zoning, then that brings a different perspective. When he's building his own court, it is my view that the fact that he's building his own court, and also for future development, I also prefer the parking to be in the front of the building versus the back of the building. And secondly, also for the fact that what the developer mentioned with respect to if the parking would ever go into the back, then there's a lot more cutting of trees, and then that natural buffer on the back becomes a problem also for the campground and those people that are there. So my preference would be to have the parking in the front for sure.
Okay, so we're right. Does anyone? Okay.
First of all,
What's your
this
name,
letter
sir?
was supposed to be read. Hey. Donald Boudreau, I live right across the street from there. First of all, let's note that this property in question is 488 Main Street and not 488 Greenwood. Secondly, the fact that the town of Shediac would even consider, never mind approve, having a street access through Greenwood Drive is beyond belief. The access is in question is in the middle of the curve, where has been the scene of numerous accidents through the years. If anyone had done a thorough review of the location, they might have noticed a solid brick wall on the property located at 468 Greenwood. This was constructed a number of years ago after a number of accidents whereby vehicle ended up on their property. Also, it was noted by a neighbor that in January, something was attached to our power pole at the end of our driveway for a period of 1 week. if that was the case, it was assumed that this contraption was installed to determine traffic pattern. If that was the case, we are talking of the month of January during the pandemic red lockdown. If anyone actually think that this is a true reflection of the traffic on the street, they are totally mistaken. This is an already very busy street with the bulk of the traffic going too fast. At one point, we in the area had even discussed approaching the town to discuss addressing the issue. The street in current use by a large number of people who wish to access Pointe du Chien by avoiding Main Street. There are also people crisscrossing the street with their golf cart, golf bags to access the golf course, which is on both sides of the street. The entrance of Greenwood off the Main Street is currently a problem. It is narrow and very curvy, with vehicle pulling out of down street, which limits vision. The winter snow buildup makes it even worse. To encourage and allow more traffic would be a mistake. Again, if a true review of the location had been made as opposed to approve of this situation, the quite obvious decision and the only decision that would have made sense would be to not allow access through Greenwood and to have the access located on Main Street. Let's hope that common sense will prevail and that the decision is based on a good judgment and not a other factor. Please submit this to your meeting. Nobody did, so I did it. But
Thank you, Mr. Boudreau.
please, I mean, you guys must have driven on that street many times. And it's not a good street to be putting a big development like that and the access of all these buildings going on Greenwood.
Does anyone?
Please
have
put
any-
that on Main Street.
Yep.
That's my concern. I'm not trying to stop the project, but I don't like the idea of being on Greenwood because, first of all, I'm gonna have lights in my windows every night, whatever. I mean, and it's a danger. It's
So-
right in the curve.
This letter was received by us, and it's more with regards to the subdivision application and not the variance.
Yeah.
So the concerns have been forwarded to council, because they are the ones who are going to be approving that street. We will be making a recommendation to council with regards to the street, and that's actually the next item coming up.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions for Monsieur Boudreau? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boudreau.
Pardon me?
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak on behalf or against these variances?
Hello, my name is Denis. I live on Greenwood Drive as well. Neighbor to the last person just spoke. So, as he said, that court sticking out on Greenwood, obviously no traffic was ever done or studied right. Speed way too high. It's in a blind turn. Snow removal can't accept that street at the very top. You can't even meet two cars in the wintertime after a storm because it's too narrow. Then you're talking about a walking trail. If you have that court pointing out right on Greenwood Drive, where are people going to go to hit the walking trail? Right between our two houses. This was an issue in the past. The city had actually put a fence up in the trail to stop people going through our yards. It doesn't make sense. And like Don said, the address is 488 Main Street, not Greenwood. The main access should be Main Street. If there's an access on Greenwood, it should be for dump trucks or fire or necessities, not general public and traffic.
Thank you. Any questions for Monsieur Landry? Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak on behalf?
My name is Randy Armada. I'm the one live at 468 Greenwood Drive. That's what I'm my concern too. If they put the exit there, my house is not far from we call that the curb. That's what I'm concerned.
Okay.
If they put the big exit there, what's gonna happen for the traffic? I'm scared they're gonna hit something or accident there. And my house is not far from we call that the road. It's probably a couple meters.
Okay, so your concern
That's
is
what
more
my
location
concern,
of the
yeah.
road, right? And not the variances?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Jeanne Gauguin. I live on 464 Greenwood, and I support the three gentlemen that just mentioned their concern, and I support their concern.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, merci. So thank you. So, I guess we should recommend 5 different motions, right?
Okay, so I'll bring the motions back up on the screen, and we can go through it one at a time.
Perfect. Okay, so I need someone to make a motion for the first variance. Monsieur
Move to
Mr.
approve.
Ryan? So
I so move to approve.
to approve it as described by the...
As per, do you want me to read the whole motion?
No, no, no. Just want to make sure I understand the
can.
motion. Okay, so does somebody second that motion? Monsieur Boudreau, does anybody have any questions about that motion? So the motion is to approve as described by the staff. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Approved, thank you. Second motion. This is for the flat roof. So is anybody, let me see it.
Presented.
As presented, okay, by Monsieur Després. Does anyone second that motion? Monsieur Bryan? Any question about that motion? So the motion is to approve the flat roof as proposed by staff. Okay, all right, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Approved. The third variance is for the driveway width from 6 meters to 7.6 meters. So Monsieur Boudreau is proposing this motion to accept the width of the driveway, seconded by Monsieur Bell. Any questions about this one? All of those in favor say aye. Against? Approved. The fourth motion is to allow the parking in front of the building. This one, the staff is proposing to refuse the parking in front of the building, so it should be moved in the back. So.
I so move that it be accepted, not refused.
So you
That
accept that
be
the parking lot
accepted.
be in front of the
Yes.
building? Okay, does anyone want to second that motion? Monsieur Boudreau? Any questions about this? So the proposal is to accept the parking in front of the building. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Approved. The last one is the variance, kind of related, but the variance to allow the building to be at 26 meters from the street instead of 6.5 meters. So does anyone have a motion on that one?
I so move to be, would you want? That's accepted or refused? Accepted.
So Mr. Bryan is proposing, seconded by Madam.
Well, she can propose and I can
Okay.
second.
Okay, so go
She
ahead.
was proposing, yeah.
So you're proposing to refuse the. Okay, but they propose to refuse it, so you're saying, the commission is proposing to refuse this motion?
No,
But
instead
you're-
of
you're
refuse
proposing
is
to
to
accept it
accept.
instead, the variance. Okay, so you propose to refuse the setback, correct? Okay, so does anyone,
She
second
wants
that
to
motion.
refuse the setback?
Yeah, the motion is to refuse the setback. So does anyone want to second that motion?
No.
Okay, no one seconds. So does anyone want to make another motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the setback, the change in setback.
Okay, so does anyone else second that motion? Monsieur Boudreau? So the proposal is to allow the setback of 26 meters instead of 6.5 meters. Everyone understands? Okay, so we allow a setback of 26 meters. That's what that's what the proposal is, right? Do you want to change your, you still second that motion?
Mm-hmm. No, the parking's in the front.
We just approved it in the front. Is to accept it, the building to be, okay, so you still accept that, you second that motion? Okay. Any other questions on this motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Makes sense? Okay, so for the record, Madame Murphy voted against that motion. That's it. Thank you. Okay, so next item, 7A. This is for a recommendation to the subdivision to the same property, so you can go ahead.
So this is a follow-up to the first application, but really should have probably gone first. It's just the way the agenda is worded. This is the recommendation to council for the location of the new public street as well as the lands for public purpose. So this is the tentative subdivision plan that was received. You can see that they are proposing a new section of public road. Mouse doesn't show up here? Doesn't show up on there? No. So you can see the new public road as well as the lands for public purposes. There's another blow up on the next screen that shows a little bit better. The street is 20 meters wide with the radius at the turnaround that meets the subdivision bylaw requirements, as well as the length of the cul-de-sac is below the requirements of the subdivision bylaw. So everything with regards to the creation of the street meets the existing subdivision bylaw in the town of Shediac. It's really just the formality of having council assent to the street and take ownership of it after it's been constructed to their standards. There's also the question of the lands for public purpose that meets the dedication of the 10% of the land exclusive of the streets. So there's no issue there either. If we go to the next slide, this is an aerial photo of the site today, or not today, that's actually last summer, a few years ago. You can see the water course along the boundary of the property, and the access is in a significant curve on Greenwood Street. It was immediately our concern as well about site safety and suitability of sight lines at the intersection. This was addressed by the developer and the sight lines provided to the Department of Public Works with the town of Shediac, and they've accepted the sight lines, so the street is okay to go there. This is a bit of the proposed development concept plan. Nothing on this plan is being approved here today, other than building A and the variances we just went through. But it does show where the trail connection goes through the lands for public purpose. The idea is that perhaps one day having an access directly out to Greenwood. It's along a water course and it's held privately. But that would be discussions that the municipality can have with that individual if one day they want to make a direct connection out to Greenwood. Otherwise, the developer is proposing creating a municipal service easement along the boundary there to connect the end of the trail out to this new public road that they're building, and from there gain access to the street and Greenwood and beyond. We certainly do recognize, and it was stated in the staff report, that there's infrastructure gaps on Greenwood. There's no sidewalks, it's still ditches, there's no curbs. It's not the ideal location to direct pedestrian traffic. However, we look at it in the opposite direction where This is a high-density residential development that's occurring. There's going to be a lot of new people moving into the area, and this will actually allow people from Greenwood and this development to access Main Street and the services there, Tim Hortons, Pizza Delight, et cetera, et cetera. So from that point of view, it is a good short-term solution, and there's also definitely some long-term potential that can be advantageous for the town. Zoning, we've gone through this already. Half of it's zoned R3, the other half is general commercial. It doesn't really relate much to the subdivision. Consultation, we discussed this with municipal staff from day one, and the street location as well as the land for public purpose were acceptable to the town. No public notice was sent out for this subdivision, again, because the application meets all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So this is a by right development. They're not infringing on any of the existing rules. They're falling in the sandbox, so to speak. So there's no necessary consultation process with the public. What we have done is we did receive the letter that was addressed to you earlier. We've forwarded that on to council, as I said, and they will be able to deliberate those comments, and they will make the decision whether or not to accept the street in that location. Legal authority under the Community Planning Act is that council cannot assent to this street until the committee has recommended its location, or a majority of the whole accepts it otherwise. And I guess the only other thing to note is that at the time of the writing of the report, we had not yet received proposed street names for this street. And we did receive some last week. I forwarded those names to Public Safety, E911, and I have not yet received a response from them. So at this point, council will have to decide whether to move ahead with the name without getting E911 to approve it. But we can always do a recommendation for the street and then come back and do a resolution of council to accept the street name down the road. It doesn't prevent him from moving ahead with the subdivision. It's really just we cannot register the plan until there's a name that's been approved by council. So the motion before you is that staff respectfully recommends that the Shediac Planning Review and Adjustment Committee recommend to council the location of public road XXXX as well as the lands for public purpose as shown on the Shediac Bayview subdivision plan attached, subject to the following condition: that the developer shall submit a drainage plan to be approved by the town of Shediac and all easements and encumbrances be identified on the subdivision plan. The developer shall enter into a subdivision agreement with the town of Shediac for the construction of streets and any other services deemed necessary by the town of Shediac, and that all streets and services are to be constructed according to the town of Shediac subdivision development standards and guidelines.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any questions from the committee members? Someone ready to make a motion? Mr. Boudreau? You recommend that we accept as proposed? Does someone second that motion? Monsieur Després, any questions about this motion? The motion is to recommend to council to accept this street. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Against? Okay, approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, 8A. This is a modify the zoning regulation for provided by DD Gautreau Services, Ville de Shediac. Excuse me, this one's in French.
I think we should bring Denis back in if he's still here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
God, you're here.
Get him in for at least one item. Donc, la demande devant...
This is a zoning request to allow automobile sales and accessory use for automobile repair garages. It's a rezoning request, so we recommend it to council, who takes final decision. The council created the resolution We sent public notices on March 8th for tonight, and we need 3 readings by council before adoption. For a bit of history, for automobile sales, it's not allowed in the municipality since 2012 because council at that time decided they didn't want to see that in town at that time. So all sales, automobile sales in the town were there before they changed the bylaw, but they can't start up again now. So we want to have sales on existing garages now. So you must invest in the property to do that. The two uses are compatible. Garages take a lot of space, and so do cars. The amendment proposed will only apply to the general commercial zone, not in the downtown. It would not be allowed to do vehicle sales there. But so this is for the commercial zone. A lot of existing established will have to conform. Let's say if Chevrolet that wanted to come, they would not be allowed. But with this amendment, they would be allowed. So it will leave it open for other establishments there to go ahead. So with the zoning map, you see this in red, it's general commercial where it would be permitted, Main Street, Ohio, and east as well, but not downtown. The proposed amendment is going to attach to your report. Legal or authority is 110(1) for recommendation to council. The recommendation is that staff recommends that the Shediac Planning Review and Adjustment Committee recommend to the municipal council the approval of the amendment request from Go-To Services Inc. to allow the sale of vehicles as an accessory use for a public garage in the general commercial zone. Thank you. Any questions? You ready for the motion? A seconder? Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. Thank you. Carried. That's all for the items today. The next meeting will be held on April 26th at 5:30 p.m. Some people arrived too early today. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
See.